Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm Susan Corbett, a custom machine quilter, with a treat for you today. This is a show quilt. It's a combination of piecing and appliqué, hand appliqué. The client asked for leaves. I thought we would go the flower route, but she said she wanted the focus to be on her appliquéd flowers, not the quilted flowers. And I talked her into a little bit of feathers just to keep it, a little bit more interesting. So there's a variety of things. There's a lot to look at here. But it turned out really well, and it's so gorgeous. Look at that curved cross-hatching. So, right off the bat, there was a little bit of not too big of a challenge. She got the idea to use that faux leather braid for the stem. And she talked it over with a few people, and they were concerned that it wouldn't work, that it wouldn't go under the needle of this long arm. And I thought, well, I bet it will. So we tested it. She brought a little tiny quilt sandwich over and a piece of that braid, and we ran it through the machine, and it was just no problem whatsoever. You can imagine that the presser foot will pound away at it, and it did, so it flattened it a little bit, but that happened with the press foot on her machine when she machine couched it onto the top in the first place. It survived. It was just no problem whatsoever. I mean, after all, these days people machine quilt on all leather, not just little bits and pieces like this. So that was no problem. All right. So, as usual, I start by stabilizing, ditch quilting between borders and the body of the quilt, and maybe in between sashing and blocks and that kind of thing. So I've done that for most of the quilt, and here what I'm doing is outlining the appliqué right up against the edge of it, catching those little berries where possible. Sometimes I just needed a stitch or two to go over and grab that berry. The others that were a little farther away got saved to do during the other parts of the quilting, so no problem. Here I'm using clear thread. I didn't want a lot of thread changes. The backing fabric is a cream, so I wanted the look of all one color thread on the top. That didn't exactly happen. I used clear to stabilize, and then I switched to one an off-white and another creamier color. We were up against a type of deadline here, and I didn't want to have to send off for thread in December. That's a tricky time for shipping. So I used two different threads strategically in places. You'll notice that her background fabric is not just all pure white. It's a bunch of different neutrals. So that blended in well. If you didn't know that, you probably would never catch on. So there's minimal, if any, quilting on the appliqué itself. I mean, look how small these pieces are. So I veined the leaves in clear. It's not that much. Had I used matching thread, then there would be so many stops and starts and little bits of green all over the background, the backing fabric. And that would slow things down and be unsightly. So with the clear thread, I'm able to quilt invisibly. I'm just outlining the patches. Imagine what it's like to hand applique all those points. She said it took her a long time to do, and I believe it. But that is so pretty. So leaves drove the design scheme. I like to do something different in the enclosed spaces, and where those two flowers meet, that makes up a space. So then, I don't know, somehow we came up with the curved cross-hatching ideas there. So after I got all those stabilized, as I went, I ditch quilted between these blue setting triangles and the body of the quilt. I found a great triangular motif that I quilted digitally in that patch. And I will not be showing that part of the process here today. So I took this video, this clip, to show the client how it was going. So here's a look at some of the motifs in here without the background quilting. Those leaves are so simple that this part went really fast. This quilt was difficult and simple. It was hard and really easy. Some parts were hard, other parts were really easy. You can see here how I quilted some of the fabrics in that medallion. So here is a look at a feather branch just going in. I start at the top of the stem and make the stem down to where I think I want it to be. And that's always a judgment call. I mean, how do you know where to place these things? You just kind of have to guess. But I do quite a bit of thinking about it and rarely rip things out. I think my guesses are usually pretty good. So there's lots of ways to make a feather. This is my reigning favorite way, although it helps to know all the different methods to get you out of situations here and there. So here I have switched, I've taken off the clear thread and I'm using a rather thin thread. This will be, I'm not sure which color of So Fine by Superior. It's a 50 weight poly, really skinny. You can use it for motifs, you can use it for background quilting. It works interchangeably. I use quite a bit of it. After I got the feathers put in, I went back and did some little tiny dimensional quilting to decorate the stem. And in this case, they're just little crescents. So once you start at the top, make a row of feathers, make the next line, add some more feathers, then it's easy just to go right back into the stem and get that decorated. It just adds a nice little detail, some eye candy. And this quilt will be for show, so that's where you want that kind of thing. That's pretty. You can see the minimal quilting in the applique, in the flowers in the medallion. It's just hardly anything, but it makes it puff up attractively. So here I'm going to add another row of leaves. It wasn't very difficult to maneuver around those berries. And in some places it looks like the leaf is behind the berry. And some of the berries that were too far away to stabilize with clear thread, I just outlined them when I got to them. Or I could do that when I do the background quilting. Learning to do freehand leaves is one of the best things I think you can do. They're so versatile. They're easy. You can, maneuver them into any shape you want. Great big, little bitty, curvy, or more oval, whatever. And they go really quickly once you know what you're doing. Okay, so one of the things that's making such a big difference here is the batting. I suggested we use Quilters Dream wool, which is pretty high loft, because of course I wanted to trapunto all this stuff, but we didn't want to go to all the trouble. The client had a few instances of fabric dye bleed, even despite all her exhaustive efforts to prevent that from the start. It happened anyway. So washing the quilt after a formal trapunto was not going to be an option here. So that's what led us to choose this bat. You can quilt it densely or loosely and it's going to behave. And the motifs are just going to pop right out there, which is exactly what we want. And that helps to feature the appliqué. That's what we really want. So, onto these parts of the quilt. I had, you can see above where I'm quilting now, I had already started the curved cross-hatching. This is where the degree of difficulty went way up, and the time it took to do also went way up. That's a tedious process. Cross-hatching is great, but you're quilting the line twice. So I would do a little bit of that and then stop and, to add these little details in there just for a break in that tedious process. So for this, I got out all my curves, all my half circles. I don't do this very often. Well, I don't crosshatch very often. It's time consuming and tedious, and no one wants to pay for it. I had thought that when I got the computerized machine, I would be doing a lot more of it. Yeah, that's not really how that works. That's still a difficult process with a lot more puzzles to figure out. So it's much faster to do this with a ruler, believe it or not. So I've seen all kinds of videos online. Oh, it's easy. You just plunk the ruler down and then you move it and, there it all falls into shape. That has not been my experience. Whatever ruler I'm using seems to be the wrong one. Even if they nest, as these do, the angle still seems to be off. I find myself overcompensating right and left. So this part wasn't fun. So why do it? Well, the payoff was huge. It looks great. And, well, it's just so pretty. And it's kind of unexpected. This is a traditional quilt, so we were trying to keep that traditional mood happening here. So some kind of crosshatch we thought was in order. I pointed out the curves to the client on a sample quilt that I have, and she really liked it. So that's kind of how we ended up here. Plus, this is kind of a circular area of the quilt anyway. Look how there's half circles in the flowers. Look how the branches kind of make a sort of circle. The center of the whole appliqué patch is a circle. There's so many lines already in the fabric prints, so this was going to be really good contrast. There's something about a line on top of a line that kind of made a straight crosshatch less attractive. And but in either case, straight or curved, you still have those leaves to get around. They get in the way. It needs to look like the quilting is behind the appliqué. So there's a lot of stops and starts, and there's just no way to avoid that. I tried to limit the stops and starts. You know, I could have backtracked 8 times to get where I wanted to go, but I don't have a problem with stopping and starting. So for the people out there who are always asking me, why does custom quilting have to cost so much? This is a prime example of why. It takes expertise, experience, and time. The people who ask that question are not the people who are going to want to learn how to machine quilt in the first place. So there's a lot they don't know. And that's probably also the same kind of person who would never ask for custom quilting in the first place either. Not everybody is into custom quilting, which I don't understand at all, but I'm biased in that regard. This was kind of difficult for another reason. As you can see, these little shirting prints can kind of make you go cross-eyed after a while. The light from this long arm hitting the white fabrics kind of creates a blinding snowstorm. It was hard to see. But it was very much worth doing. You can see a little bit of the computer motif I put there on the right side. It's a floral block design. Really pretty. One of the consequences of that is there's a difference in density of the quilting in the body of the quilt and out there around the perimeter. That is not a good thing. I wish there had been more quilting. But see, that fabric print, gorgeous though it is, it's not really going to allow any of the quilting to really show up. You can see it well in this picture. It's good up close and personal, but you get a few feet away from it and it disappears completely. So that's not where you want to put a lot of time and attention. I thought about a grid in those patches, but there's already a grid in the print of the fabric. So either I quilt along the line already in it, or then you've got 2 lines that are going to fight each other. So these are the considerations. See, there's a lot that goes into this kind of effort, a lot of decisions that need to get made. And so you might think, well, there's not much, this piece where the curved cross-hatching is going in is not all that big, so it'll go really quickly and it won't be a problem. Yeah, but it happens over and over and over. It's the number of repeats. After I got through with it, I thought, well, I don't have to do that again for a really long time, I hope, because it wasn't fun. And one of the other things to consider, I'm always puzzled when I see quilting that just stops in the middle of nowhere and then the quilter puts some other design in. I like for there to be some rationale as to what stops where. So it was a bit of a constant judgment call to decide when those curves were going to stop where the flowers kind of meet. And each one is probably a little bit different. I don't think you'll notice it unless you go to look for it, but they're not all the same because the placement of the appliqué is not in the exact same place every single time. So what have I left out? Let's see. There's only one layer of wool bat in this quilt. I don't think there's any need for double batting here. The applique is already going to puff up. This bat has all sorts of loft already. It's, I think, more difficult to quilt a quilt with two bats in it. So I'm glad we didn't go that way. Is it a stiff quilt in the end? Kind of. But this is a show quilt. It's for display. No one's ever going to sleep under it. It doesn't need to be super flexible. But even Quilters Dream wool is pretty soft and drapey. If you want a wool bat to be extremely drapey, then that's when you want a layer or two of Hobbs wool. So you can see in the upper right part of this frame, the leaves have a couple rows of echo around them and a little bit of background quilting already in there. So we'll be getting to that part here pretty quick. This is where I'm saying I had to decide, when do you stop quilting curved lines? And so that decision made for some backtracking and some stops and starts and some decision making. How many is too many? How many is too little or too few? Okay, so there's your payoff. Super gorgeous. Okay, then there's all the rest of the quilt. Wow. These little baskets are pretty tiny. They're pieced. And see, I see every little space as a way to delight the eye in one more way. So, of course, I need to put something inside the basket. So that's getting just some little straight feathers that end up looking sort of like a stylized flower in the end. So just some feathery loops and then outline, or I should say echo, once or maybe twice. I did curved cross-hatching in the basket itself. But that's gorgeous. So you can kind of see around it. See the flower in the upper left? The lines that emanate from it that go right into the basket? I like that. I saw that on a quilt a long time ago. I took a picture of it and love to do that whenever I can. All right. So this is one of the decisions you make in the very beginning. Is each block a separate unit? Or where the backgrounds run into other backgrounds, is it all one background? I kind of like it when it's all one background because you have more room to play, which is what ended up happening here. So the background quilting is circles and swirls and echo, a few wavy lines, and so it's a combination background. And the way you decide what to do is, well, how much space do you have right now? What's up against it? What did you most recently do? What does this patch need? Is there a seam in the way? In which case, I just want to squash it and not have anything that really needs to stand out too much. You can see in the piece block, the red block, I've quilted just a line through the stem of the print in those long printed rectangles. I quilted a line around the black stripe I didn't put any quilting inside the red triangles. This area here that I'm quilting, does that need to be quilted? Oh, I think so. I think if you leave it blank, you're taking the easy way out. For a finished uniform look, I think all the background needs to be quilted. And therefore, that makes the handle of the basket puff up even more. So that's what we want, for sure. So it's dense in some places and not as dense in others, depending on what there's room for and which design I'm doing at any given moment. This is a make it up as you go along kind of a thing. Let's fill that basket one more time. Echo to get back over to the other side. And then echo back to the middle. Easy, fast, cute, and very effective. Get those thread tails out of the way. When you quilt all the background, you see how much background there really is. What I hear from clients is, oh, well, there's not space here to do much of anything. Oh, yes, there is. There's a lot of space. And show quilting is all about details. So the more cool things you can think of to throw in there. I mean, not everything you know how to do, but a variety of things is good. I could have picked a simpler background quilting design. That would have gone faster, I guess. But I don't think it would have been near as cool. I did continuous curve in the center square of those black and red blocks, the star, because they needed a little something. They didn't need a whole lot, but it did need a little something. You'll notice all the great ways in which the client fussy cut her prints. Very effective. She's a real whiz at needle turn appliqué. This is not needle turn. This is some other method that involved a whole bunch of, I think, glue and paper. And there's a good look at the motif in the setting triangle. I used a heavier thread for that. We like the simplicity of the design, you know, because it is in keeping with the theme of the quilt, but not so busy that it would fight too much with that print. I don't know what the right thing to do was there, but that's what we ended up doing. I did echo quilt around the branches of leaves and the feathers at least once, so the background quilting isn't right up against them. And you see how you can see some of the quilting in some fabrics and really not in others. The quilting in that little pin dot is going to be really hard to see, unless you're up close. Harriet Hargrave, who I've learned so much from her and her books years ago. She says when you learn how to machine quilt, you'll make different choices about a lot of things. But one of those things will be in the fabrics you select. You know, I have this great motif I want to use. Is it going to show up on that fabric? But that's if you machine quilt. That'll probably never occur to you if you don't, which is a shame. That's a beautiful print right there in that bottom basket. The perfect patch for that. Here's a look at the back of the quilt. Here's the big payoff. Moment we've all been waiting for. Look at all the different textures. The dense quilting, the non-dense quilting. That turned out great. So there is your show quilt. Look for it in a quilt show near you. And I will see you next time with who knows what. Thanks for watching.